Welcome everyone to our third Get It Straight class. Today's topic is truancy and its consequences. We have a special guest with us today. Her name is Cynthia Gonzalez. She's the Deputy City Attorney assigned to Hollenbeck area as the neighborhood prosecutor. Please remember to pay attention and take notes if you like. We have a survey at the end of the video. Thank you. Hi Cynthia, welcome. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Well, folks, today we have a very special guest. Cynthia's going to share some information with us about school attendance and absenteeism or truancy. Cynthia?
Sure. Hi, everyone. So I'm sorry I'm not there in person, but I'm sure I'll see you guys sometime in the future if you make it into maybe becoming a lawyer, which I'm sure you guys are all interested in. So what I do is I'm a deputy city attorney for the city of Los Angeles, and I'm a neighborhood prosecutor. I work out of the police station most of the time, and I also prosecute misdemeanor quality of life cases throughout the Hollenbeck area. So that includes like Boyle Heights, El Sereno, Lincoln Heights. And so today I'm going to talk to you guys about a very important topic, attendance and truancy. And you may think, why is there a prosecutor talking about attendance and truancy? What does the prosecutor have to do with me going to school? I'm here to tell you that in California, there's a penal code section that I'll be going over. It makes it a crime for a parent not to take a child to school. And so you can actually go to jail. Your parents can go to jail if they do not take you to school, because they're going to be contributing to your delinquency. And they can actually face time in jail and be sort of grouped with all the other criminals in jail if this does happen. So we'll go over that today, and throughout our session, my understanding is that we'll have some questions, and I'll try to address those questions as best as I can. And I believe the Pell program will be providing you with some of my contact info in case you have follow-up questions later on. So let's go through the slide. So what is truancy? Truancy, a student in full-time, so chronic truancy, a student in full-time education or continuation education who is absent from school without a valid excuse for 10% or more of the school days in one school year from the date of enrollment to the current date. That person is going to be considered a chronic truant. So what that sort of levels out to once you're in school is about 12 unexcused absences throughout a school year. And it can be unexcused absences or unexcused tardies for more than 30 minutes. And so in California, your child is considered a truant after 3 unexcused absences or 3 unexcused tardies of 30 minutes or more. Or it could be a combination of both in one school year. So just keep that in mind, and then we're going to go on to the next slide. So what is excused and unexcused? So absences for which a valid excuse was not provided will be counted toward truancy classification. Policy requires that any tardy, absence, and early leave be cleared within 10 school days. So we'll go over what is an excused absence and what is not excused. So not an excused absence: minor headaches or stomach aches, a student doesn't like his or her teacher, a student is helping her parents with chores at home, a rainy day or extremely hot day, sleeping late, transportation, your parent got a flat tire, homework, projects, and lastly, family vacations. So it's important to know these because, yes, sometimes there are emergency situations where you can't make it to school because for some reason you don't have a way to get to school because of transportation. Your mom has a flat tire, the car doesn't turn on, or your little brother's sick and your mom can't leave the house. Yes, those are not excused absences, but you are allowed to have unexcused absences. Just remember that there's a limit on them. I'm going to go on to this next slide. So what are valid excuses? If you are sick, you may only be excused if you have a note from a doctor, a school nurse, an attendance counselor, or an administrator. So a school administrator is asking the parent to take a child home from school. So if a school administrator is asking the parent to take a child home from school, as a parent, you have to remember, always ask for a note from the school, because the last thing you want is for the school to be telling you to take a child home because he or she is sick, and you go home without a note, and later on the school's telling you, well, your student is classified as a truant because you didn't provide an excuse for his or her absence. So that's not what you want to happen to you. You want to make sure that if the school is telling you you need to take your child home for whatever reason, the child got in trouble, or he's not behaving, or he or she is sick or has symptoms, then you always ask for a note. Because if it were up to you as a parent, your child would be in school, but the school is telling you now that you have to take your child home. So let's talk about the consequences. And this is what's really important to know, because a lot of parents don't know, and a lot of students don't know, that you could be prosecuted criminally if you don't take your child to school. So if you allow your child to miss school without the proper documentation, you could be prosecuted under Penal Code 272, subsection A, subsection 1. And in that penal code, it says that you could face up to a year in jail and or a fine of $2,500. So this is important, because once your parent is prosecuted, he or she will be grouped with everybody else who commits crimes. So it may not seem like a typical crime for your parent not to take you to school, but in the state of California, it is a crime. So your parent can be physically arrested by police if he or she does not take his or her child to school, or if the child refuses to go to school and the parent doesn't do enough to make sure that the child is going to school. So let's talk about what truancy leads to. 90% of juveniles in the California Youth Authority have dropped out of school. So what does that tell you? That tells you that most criminals start off by being truant. Why? Because when you start being truant and you have extra time in your hands when you're ditching school, you start hanging out with the wrong crowd. You start hanging out at the parks, maybe smoking some weed, maybe being exposed to the wrong crowd, maybe the gangs. And that's when things go sideways, because you are now being exposed to a lot of activity that you would not have been exposed if you were in school. Hardcore gang prosecutors have never seen a gang member who did not start off as a truant. So this is also important. It has to do with having that extra time throughout the day. So if you're not in school, you're going to find something to do. So when you're in the park hanging out with everybody else who chooses not to go to school, not to follow the rules, you may end up becoming a gang member, being involved in some sort of gang activity. So you end up vandalizing, maybe doing things that you don't want, developing a criminal record as a juvenile. So be mindful that school, even though you may not like it right now, later on, everything will pay off. 80% of all male prison inmates did not graduate from high school. So most people that are in our prisons never graduated high school. And the way to not graduate high school is to not even go to school, right? When you stop going to school, you fall so behind that you no longer have the possibility of graduating. So as a parent, it's very, very, very important to be an advocate for your child. You are essentially your child's lawyer. So you have to make sure you are constantly talking to the teachers, the principal. Know who the principal is, know who the superintendent is. You need to be an advocate, because sometimes it's not your child's fault. Sometimes the teacher just can't get along with your child, or sometimes the teacher misunderstands your child. So you as a parent is responsible for making sure that your child has a voice in that school. So if need be, you as a parent needs to know that you have the right to attend school with your child. You have the right to sit next to your child in every single class. Discuss alternative education programs. Not every student learns the same. Sometimes they have different ways of learning math. Some people are more graphic than others. Determine whether an opportunity to transfer is necessary. Maybe they need to go to a new school. Maybe they've been bullied. Bullying is a big topic, and I'm sure you'll cover it throughout this program. But if your child is being bullied, that may be a reason why he or she does not want to go to school. So you as a parent needs to know what your child is doing, who he's hanging out with, who his friends are, because you don't want to be surprised. So as a parent, your obligations include asking questions and really setting up those parent conferences with the teachers and making sure you know your child, okay? Because your child doesn't have a right to privacy because he's a minor. Know that you as a parent have the right to go through your child's backpack to make sure you know where who your child's best friend is. And if your child has a cell phone, remember who pays that cell phone, and that's the parent typically. So if you are giving your child a cell phone, make sure you have access to all the social media programs that are out there. And we're talking about Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat. And there may be a lot of you students that believe that in some of these programs, for example, Snapchat, if you post a video, that video will instantly delete after a few views or after a few seconds. And that's not necessarily true, because remember, when I'm in court, I can always subpoena the records from Snapchat if there's anything that's criminal related there. So just be careful what you post on Facebook as well. This goes for parents as well. If you're posting stuff where, let's say you're a minor drinking alcohol, later on, let's say you're applying for a job or law enforcement, they're going to run a background check and they're going to see, well, as a minor, you were drinking alcohol. What does that say about you as a responsible student or as a responsible minor? It doesn't really show that you have the ability to follow the rules and follow the laws. So be mindful when you're posting stuff. And also threats that are made on Facebook. I know a lot of schools have started monitoring stuff that's going on because there's been a lot of bullying going on these websites. Remember, everything could be taken back. So if you delete something, it doesn't mean it's deleted forever. Those things can always be subpoenaed in court. So what are some possible collateral consequences for your parents if they end up being prosecuted for not taking you to school? This is important because you may think, okay, my parent gets prosecuted. Okay, he or she goes to jail for a few months. Okay, big deal. Okay, they pay a fine, big deal. And you may not care, but think about these consequences. So if your parent happens to be undocumented and they're in this country, or let's say they're a resident of this country, they're not a citizen and they're receiving any type of public benefits, if they have a crime on their record and that crime is contributing to a delinquency of a minor, which is this specific penal code section, it may be that the worst case scenario, they may end up being deported due to a conviction under this penal code, or they may end up losing their housing if now they have to report that they've been convicted of a misdemeanor under this section. And for any future jobs for your parents, it may affect their qualifications now, because they have to check off that mark that now they've been convicted of a misdemeanor. Any type of financial applications, any licenses to practice a profession. All of this may be impacted by having a conviction on your record. So just be mindful of this when you decide you don't want to go to school because you just want to hang out with your friends. Okay, now let's talk about this article. So on your screen, you have an article and it says Adolfo Amador 14. Adolfo Amador, some of you may remember, he was a 14-year-old Latino teenager who died on March 14th in 2019 after he was shot on the 300 block of North St. Louis Street in Boyle Heights, which is just up the street from the Hollenbeck police station. So at about 11:45 a.m. on March 13th, Adolfo was standing on the sidewalk when a person approached him. The two engaged in a brief conversation, then the person pulled out a gun and shot Adolfo, police said. Police said the dispute was related to gangs. Adolfo was taken to the hospital where he was pronounced dead at 1:23 a.m. The suspect shooter was identified as Juan Garcia, a 21-year-old Latino. Garcia was charged March 19th with 1 count of murder with a gun and with gang allegations. So, as you notice in the bottom, they're going to be asking, so the police department is asking for information on this. And this is important because look at the time that this occurred, 11:45 a.m., March 13th. So this is the time typically when kids are in school, okay? So it just goes to show how dangerous it can be for you to be out there during the day. Instead of being in school, you end up hanging out with the wrong crowd and maybe getting involved with gangs, and it's dangerous. There's 34 documented gangs within the Hollenbeck division area. So just be careful when you decide, and always think about the consequences when you decide you don't want to go to school. So let's talk about what happens when you miss classes and graduation is at risk. When you miss about 0 to 4 classes in a semester, you're about 80 to 90% chance that you're going to graduate. When you're missing 5 to 9, now you're at about 65% maybe chance that you will graduate. Missing 10 to 14 days, you're about 40%. So there's a trend here. So the more days that you're absent per semester, the less likely that you will graduate. This is important because what happens when you miss classes? You fall behind. And once you start falling behind, it gets harder to catch up. And you start just forgetting of everything and saying, I don't really care anymore. It's impossible for me to catch up. I'd rather just go hang out with my friends.
Okay, thank you, Cynthia. And I have a couple questions, if I may, Cynthia.
Sure.
I know we get questions quite often from parents. What can a parent do when they take their child to school in the morning and they pick them up in the afternoons, yet they still continue to get notices about that their child is truant because they've missed classes in between? How does that factor in with truancy? Is it true? And the second question would be, are 3 absences from school if they don't show up at all, or is it 3 absences from any given period or class throughout the day? I'm sorry, it was 2 questions.
Sure. Okay, so the first question was, and I'm sorry, you're going to have to repeat it.
What can a parent do? What
can a parent do if I'm a parent and I'm dropping off my child in the morning, picking them up in the afternoon, and I'm still getting notices that my child's not going to school? Okay, so first of all, you need to have a conversation with your child. And if the child says, I'm in school, I don't know why they're sending you that. Okay, then next you have to go meet with the school. Meet with the teachers. Start with the teachers and then move on to the principal. And then from the principal, if there's an attendance counselor, try to set up a meeting with an attendance counselor. And if there isn't, then you want to know what's going on. So if the school is not working with you and you're doing everything possible to try to set up a parent conference, trying to be involved in your child's education, then you have to move up and you have to go to the district and speak to the superintendent, ask for meetings, and make sure everything is documented, because the last thing you want is to be getting a notice that you're now being, your case is being referred for criminal prosecution, and you have no idea why. So you have to start off by first talking to your child and then moving on to the school administration and trying to set up those meetings, because it's important to have a face-to-face meeting with school administrators. So I would do that, and everything documented. So don't just call, don't just show up. Try to follow up every meeting with an email as a follow-up to our meeting. Because you want to have that documentation. When we review cases for criminal filing for truancy, what we look for is how involved was a parent. Did the parent make an effort to work with the school? And what did that include? Did that include the parent coming in with the child, escorting the child to every class, sitting in the back of the classroom? What did that include? Trying to work with school counselors to figure out, are there other issues going on with my child? Is he being bullied? So just be as involved as possible as a parent. And then your second question, which is, what was the second question?
Was there a difference just missing school altogether versus missing particular classes throughout the day?
Oh, yes, yes. So missing more than 30 minutes in any given class is considered an absence. So if you miss, for example, if you have multiple periods and you miss multiple periods, they can be considered multiple absences. So it can be contributing to that total amount of absences. For example, the 12 days of unexcused absences that you're allowed to have in one school year, it's contributing to that. So it includes tardies, more than 30 minutes, or a whole entire school day absence. So the answer is yes, it can count as multiple absences if you're tardy on multiple classes.
Okay, thank you. And also, if you would speak on, I know you said you prosecute the parent, correct, as the city attorney, right? And
Yes.
some parents will say, well, I've done everything. Why hasn't anything happened to him or her, my child? What consequence does the child have?
Yeah. So at some point, we realized so city attorneys in the city of LA prosecute all misdemeanor crimes. So misdemeanor crimes that pertain to adults, so 18 and over. The district attorney handles misdemeanor crimes and felony crimes for juveniles, and they handle felonies for adults. So even though our office only prosecutes adults, which happens to be your parents, the child can also be prosecuted by the district attorney's office, and they can be given. They can be prosecuted through the juvenile system, and they can also face criminal charges and possibly jail time if they're being delinquent by the DA's office. So a lot of times when we see that the parent has tried everything they possibly can to try to get their child to school, and the child still just refuses to go to school, then sometimes we'll make the referral to the district attorney's office, for them to take over. And then they will review the case for their own filing purposes.
Thank you. And correct me if I'm wrong, but did you mention in the event that a parent has to be arrested and she has more than one child, what happens to the other children in the home?
Oh, yes. So that's one of the collateral consequences. I'm glad you brought that up. So if let's say you refuse to go to school and your parent ends up getting prosecuted and happens to go to jail as a result of this, and you have siblings, you have younger siblings that are your mom's responsibility, and now your mom's not there to take care of them, the children will be placed in foster care. So essentially your actions can possibly, at a worst, they can split up a family. I mean, it may be that your little brother and your little sister end up being taken into foster care, and now your mom has to work to try to prove that, she tried everything she can to take you to school, while your siblings are being raised by a foster parent. So think about that as well if you decide you don't want to go to school. And just remember, as a parent, you are an advocate for your child. So also, what are you doing as a parent to try to figure out your child? Just don't always put the blame on the school, because a lot of times parents say, well, my child doesn't want to go to school, the school keeps sending them back. And you have to understand what's going on with your child. So who are his friends? Is he acting out of the normal? Like, what is he doing? Have I searched his pockets and his pants? Does he smell a certain way? Am I smelling marijuana? So just know that you as a parent should know your child.
Well, thank you, Cynthia. But I know that you have a very interesting background. So if you would please, I'd like to share that with our families, where you grew up and why an attorney.
Sure. So I can tell you. So I grew up in Almani. Almani is it's very similar to Boyle Heights. It's in the San Gabriel Valley. It's a little city, just like Boyle Heights. And we have, while growing up, my parents are immigrants from Mexico, and I had family members that became gang members, and they were involved with Monteflores, which is the big gang there in El Monte, still very active. And growing up, I would go with my aunts to court, and I would be the one translating. I was young, maybe 10, 11, 12 years old. I would be the one translating what the public defender was saying to my aunt in terms of like my cousins going to jail and their sentence. So I was the one in charge of always telling my aunt, oh, well, now he's being sent to prison for 3-5 years. And it was hard. It was hard to see that. I would constantly see police chasing my cousins into my grandma's house. There was drive-by shootings by my house. It used to be a really rough neighborhood where I grew up. And sort of taking all of this in and seeing it all, when I was in high school, I always said, you know what? I want to come back and I want to be a public defender. I actually wanted to defend the people that were being arrested for crimes, because I always thought like they need somebody who can speak Spanish and who can communicate with the community. And so when I got accepted to UCLA, it was funny because nobody in my family had ever really gone to a university, and especially left the house at 18 years old. So my parents were kind of like, well, we can't really provide you financially with any money for you to go to college. And they were almost encouraging me to go to community college so that I can stay local. But I ended up leaving to UCLA, and it was our first time driving through Santa Monica and the Santa Monica Freeway, and it's a big deal because I know a lot of like the Boyle Heights community. It's very similar because you think that's your world, right? Like everything happens in Boyle Heights. So you go grocery shopping, you go to the park, you go to school, everything happens there. And it was the same for me growing up in El Monte. It just felt like that was my world. So when I left UCLA, it was like a whole new world. And I met so many people. It was so diverse. And so I ended up getting scholarships. So I applied to a bunch of scholarships. I ended up moving to the dorms. My parents dropped me off and they said, good luck getting home because we don't know how to get here to pick you up. So I ended up staying in the dorms for a long time. And then came back and I decided, I wanted to be a lawyer. So I ended up getting accepted to UCLA Law School, and law school is 3 years. To get your bachelor's is 4 years. So I did 7 years in college. It may seem like a long time, but it goes by super quick. Super quick. You graduate at 25 years old. You're a lawyer. You have a career. And, when I became my first career as a lawyer was being a public defender. So I defended people that were accused of crimes. And I got so much experience, and it was great because I got exposed to the criminal justice system. But I really felt so limited in what I could do, because as a public defender, your job is to advocate for those that are arrested and do what essentially they want to do. So if I have somebody who has a drug problem and wants to be out of jail, then I have to make sure that I'm advocating as much as I can to get that person out of jail, even though I know that that person needs help. So that's when I decided to become a prosecutor. So a prosecutor is on the other side. Prosecutor presents criminal charges against somebody accused of a crime. And I work with law enforcement, but I'm in a unique position because now I not only prosecute regular misdemeanors, but they're quality of life misdemeanors. So my goal is not to put people in jail. My goal is really to make people good citizens and rehabilitate them and help them out and help them get into programs. So that's really what I do, and that's how I came to be. My parents never really believed I was a lawyer because school felt like I was in school they felt like I was in school forever. So it wasn't until they saw me in Telemundo doing an interview in Spanish, and in the bottom it said Abogada Cynthia Gonzalez. So they're like, oh, she is a lawyer. And this was like 4 years after I had become a lawyer. But yeah, that's really what it is. And this is just an example of, don't limit yourself and reach for the stars. And, instead of becoming a nurse, be a doctor. Like, there's nothing that should stop you from really reaching your dreams. There's a lot of money, a lot of programs out there for people that grow up in communities like these. So yeah.
How fascinating. Thank you. Thank you so much. You are truly amazing. And we are so grateful that you are able to share all your information, and you really do care about our community. I thank you and look forward to seeing you again in our future classes. Thanks, Cynthia.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. So we take our attendance by the survey, so be sure you complete it. If you forgot how to do so, watch the video.
In the description box below the class video, you will find a link that will take you to the quiz. Click on the link and you will be directed to begin the quiz. Read the information and then press begin. The first question will prompt you to type your first and last name. Please make sure to type your first and last name, as this is how attendance will be taken. Answer all the questions in the quiz and be sure to complete the quiz by Friday at noon. For parents or guardians, remember that you will be completing 2 quizzes, one for the parenting class and one for Get It Straight.